It is the 30th of April. And yes, we are finally live. We've been recording some shows lately, but they've been really good shows. Yesterday, that we had Senator Tim Knopp reporting along with the other legislators from Oregon that have visited the southern border in the Yuma area. And then on Friday, we had Jeff Eager, blogger, investigative journalist, who has been digging into the many scandals in our state, including the ones that seem to surround a certain Congresswoman Val Hoyle, which provides a never-ending source of investigative journalism and interest. But tonight, I'm going to take through the headlines that seem to be engulfing the country. And those headlines are ominous because it looks like what started out as a protest on the Columbia University campus has mushroomed into a nationwide movement, a siege that's being laid to every single college campus, right when most college campuses should be heading for finals or are heading for finals, and certainly posing a danger to the school year for many students who, frankly, just came to study and learn. Think that's a novel idea, huh? Going to college just to study and learn, better yourself. But instead, some people have turned this into, well, frankly, we know it's opportunistically just another way for them, for the left, to assert itself. And as we've seen reported widely, this is not happening by accident. There are people and organizations that are organizing and funding this, and they are blatantly anti-Semitic. They are calling for essentially a genocide in Israel, claiming that Israel is committing genocide, for which there is no evidence of that whatsoever. There is a war going on in Gaza. It was brought on by Hamas, which controlled Gaza, and that has been the source of the entire war to date. It is totally reasonable that Israel would actually want to go and eliminate the threat and eliminate the organization that was perpetrating that threat that killed, I believe it was over 1,200 of their citizens brutally. And by the way, I want to kind of circle back on that here in a few minutes and tell you about some very interesting things that you can go and watch that talk about what happened in Gaza and Israel on October 7th of last year that gave rise to all this. But first, let's kind of talk about what's happening here in Oregon. So at Portland State University, they're actually now asking the police to help with clearing the library at Portland State, which is occupied by student protesters. These student protesters, as you hear across the country, are saying they're not going to leave. They're going to stay right there, and until they get what they want, which a lot of the time all they're doing is demanding some foreign policy result, which many of them who voted for Joe Biden should maybe talk to Joe Biden about it. But if Joe Biden can carry on a coherent conversation anymore, I don't think so. But as of 11 p.m. last night, the Portland mayor, Ted Wheeler, and the police chief, Bob Day, and the district attorney, Mike Schmidt of the Schmidt Show, they said that that the students' actions to occupy the library were now a criminal matter and not an exercise of free speech. I don't know what is exactly going to develop from that, because I'm also hearing now that the university is telling them not to do anything. I just heard that anecdotally just now. And there's also students elsewhere in Oregon at Reed College, Lewis and Clark, and University of Oregon, pretty big liberal bastions, or I should say far left. Reed College, they call themselves the Reedies. Lewis and Clark has that professor who's out there trying to release murderers and rapists onto the streets with the help of the former governor, Kate Brown, and I'm sure she's still working on the current governor to get her to do the same thing. Eliza Kaplan is her name. And so these are the vanguards of the proletariat here running these universities. And then you've got the leftist student groups that are occupying them and calling for a ceasefire. A ceasefire, uh, in the face of all that will do is give Hamas a chance to go back and do what they did before. They're unrepentant. It's a complete absurdity. Hamas is still sworn to the destruction of Israel, the death of every Israeli. They've acted upon that, and they'll do it again. So all this will do is give them a chance to recover. That's what's happening. And I don't think we should spend a lot of time telling Israel what to do. Apparently, a lot of these students, I don't know if they're having a hard time finding jobs upon graduation, or if they even have real academic studies going on. But we know a lot of the professors are kind of rooting for them. So I'm sure that they're getting special consideration that, say, Jewish and Israeli students are probably not getting. And I've heard that anecdotally as well. But it's been escalating over 5 days. There are pro-Palestinian protesters, as they describe them in the Oregonian, in tents on the South Park blocks. And I guess CUD, C-U-D-D, who is that? I think that's Portland State University President Ann Cudd has given in repeatedly, as recently as Friday night, to the student activists, and saying that it would re-examine its partnership with Boeing because of Boeing's ties to the Israeli military, which the Israeli military is there defending Israel against not only Hamas, but, as we know, against Iran. And many of these protesters are actually rooting for the Islamic Republic of Iran, the world's leading sponsor of terrorism, who launched 300 missiles and rockets at Israel just a few weeks ago. So these folks are actually calling for the elimination of Israel and the abandonment of Israel. I don't know what Joe Biden's going to do, because whoever's running Joe Biden could literally do anything at any time, especially if they are fearing losing close swing states like Michigan, where there's a sizable population that has recently done a none of the above protest vote against Joe Biden in their primary. They're worried that maybe those people will stay home and they'll lose the state of Michigan in the presidential race. But that's where things are at right now. That's the Portland state situation. And then also the national situation, which, in all honesty, Joe Biden, this is on him. None of this had to happen at all. We didn't need to be in all these wars, but the guy can't help it because he just sucks at being president. No one believes him after the stunt he pulled in Afghanistan with the withdrawal. And now every single other idiot and tyrant and fool and authoritarian ne'er-do-well in the world is looking at this and saying, well, this guy isn't going to do anything about this. In fact, he's concerned, I'm sure Biden's people are concerned, that he's going to lose the election if some war erupts, and then, like in the Middle East, if it expands, and then that causes the price of oil and gas to go up. Now, I don't know why he's concerned about that, because the climate idiots that are working for Biden are out there trying to they're trying to decarbonize every sector of the economy as quickly as they can, even if there's no alternative to utilize, and it drives up prices and further fuels inflation. Let's remember one thing. Inflation is being caused by Biden and his policies. It's being caused by restricting and regulating businesses, making it difficult for them to operate. It's by trying to inhibit the energy sector, which is the key driver of literally every category of inflation, whether it's shipping or farming or ground transportation, production. it's the backstop of it all. So he's more worried about that than he is about maybe trying to be a good president. Maybe that ship has sailed anyway. And what's great about it is maybe it's too late for Joe Biden, because there was a poll that came out yesterday, or was reported widely yesterday, that Joe Biden trails Donald Trump by 6 percentage points, which is outside the margin of error. Let's put it this way. It's even worse in swing states because the national numbers are reflective of states that tend to vote heavily for Biden, or any Democrat, like California or New York. That means that nationally, there's a whole ton of people in all the other states that are supporting Trump, including in states that Joe Biden won in 2024. If you adhere strictly to the reported election results, I'll let everyone make their own mind up on that. But yes, and I can see I can see some of you chiming in here, our regular viewers and listeners. You're right. Antifa's back. The same tactics that they use for Antifa, like where they have these food trucks that come in and start feeding all the Antifa rioters and keeping them out there day and night. They're starting to bring in food and donate stuff to these protesters. Geez, where is that coming from? Who's paying for it? No one ever gets to the bottom of that, because the people who would investigate it, they're rooting for the protesters or the rioters, or let's just call them what they are. They're really severe haters. They're anti-Semitic haters, because they actually don't say things that are conciliatory or peaceful to Israelis. They've got people out there chanting slogans that are calling for the elimination of Israel, the mass murder of Jews, and trying to justify what took place on October 7th. If there are people protesting who don't want to send that message, they've made a huge mistake by being surrounded with people who are doing exactly that. So you're right. Antifa's back. It's just morphed. And by the way, if you haven't heard this term, trans Tifa, it seems like, and Andy Ngo's been reporting this pretty extensively, and that's where I believe he came up with the term. Trans Tifa is referring to the fact that a lot of the people who are Antifa all seem to be have declared themselves to be trans. And it's often men declaring themselves to be women, although there's some, that are women that are declaring themselves to be men. And now, absurdly, they're out there protesting on behalf of Hamas. The first thing that Hamas would do if one of these folks showed up in the Gaza Strip is execute the trans people. So come on. I mean, it's just unbelievable. By the way, I do want to get to some DEI news here shortly, but let me now bring you up to speed on some very interesting information that I stumbled across yesterday. So at UCLA in Los Angeles, some clever person went and found paid for some group, an anonymous group, actually went and paid for a big, really huge, big screen television surrounded by a fence. I think it's on the campus or on the edge of the campus, not far from where the pro-Hamas protesters are located. And what they are doing is playing a video in a loop over and over that shows what one of the prominent murderous Hamas terrorists did and bragged about. It has the audio, it has the subtitles. It shows them going into, I think, like a kibbutz somewhere in the southern part of Israel, shooting people up, piles of bodies. And then that's not even the worst stuff that you could see, but it's laying down a pretty bold challenge to the people that are over just a few feet away, rioting and screaming that they believe that the people who are doing what they're doing to the Israelis and have been doing it to the Israelis are totally okay. They're totally justified, and they should be let off the hook as soon as possible. That is what these guys did, is they challenged these people, and I say more power to them. In fact, it's just super clever that they did this, and it's only a matter of time, by the way, before the rest of the population in the country sees this information and shares it with everyone. But let me see if I can find. So that there is a link to the Twitter post actually that went along with that. But then I also found something else. This is a film that debuted on the 26th of April. It's on YouTube, and it's called Screams Before Silence, and it illustrates the mass rape and murder that took place on October 7th, which so many people are pretending like it didn't happen, that are out there protesting. They're calling it Zionist propaganda. Well, I'm going to watch this. I don't think it's going to be very pleasant to watch. I think it's going to be awful. But I also think that we have to circulate this around and tell people about it, because the problem is there are literally people walking around who say that this is not true. It doesn't exist, that it's just a fantasy, a falsehood. Well, then feel free to take in the information that may contradict that point of view. Is what I say to all those people. Here is the Twitter post, by the way. I'm posting it here from UCLA. And it shows it shows the video, and then there's another link that you can see that actually shows the what took place on the campus right at about the same time as that this was being aired. Let me see if I can. And it's genius what they did. We need to think that way, I believe, because we're going to face an enormous amount of just complete garbage from the left, and it's just awful, terrible, vicious lies that has to be challenged with the reality and the facts. So let's do it. All right. Now, returning back to our regular programming here of news, there's a lot of interesting things that happened here in Oregon. I do want to make a reference to something that took place in Texas, though. In Oregon, we've got these offshore wind farms. People hate them. They're going to destroy tourism. They're going to destroy commercial and recreational fishing along the Oregon coast. About the only industries that are left after forestry, timber industry was severely decimated. Means 10%. This is decimated times 9. And so once we lost most of the timber industry, they said, well, let them eat tourism and fishing, and that's it, right? Well, they want to put up these wind farms and finish off the rest of the industries and leave the people there destitute. Southern Oregon coast is a great example of that, extending all the way up to Newport and Lincoln County. Well, a Texas official, because this Biden wind farm stuff is being done all along the East Coast, where it's lost billions. It's being done on the West Coast, like I just mentioned, and it's also being done on the in the Gulf Coast. And so in Texas, the land commissioner is challenging the Biden administration, saying that their green power initiative will cause significant environmental damage. And the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, the one that's the devil that's bedeviling Curry and Coos counties here in Oregon, who they're supposed to be taking in by law a bunch of feedback, but they plan to move ahead anyway with a 410,000 acre offshore wind lease sale near Texas in the Gulf of Mexico. And one of the major consequences of this, besides the ones I just mentioned, is that it kills a lot of whales and other ecologically sensitive areas and creatures along the coast. Now, remember when it used to be that it was the left that was trying to save the whales? Well, now they're trying to kill the whales as quickly as they can. And whale deaths along the East Coast are linked directly to the offshore wind development. Well, this is a really interesting. Yeah, I'm going to share it before it's blocked, Lori, because and everybody else should share what I just. But this offshore wind stuff is insidious because they're going to do it anyway. They don't really care what anyone thinks whatsoever. So we're going to have to fight back against this stuff. And so take a look at that article because it really is, and it's just an awful thing that they're doing in the name of the climate gods and also the crony capitalists who want to put this stuff there, who, by the way, are almost entirely foreign owned companies. Now, they skirt the edge of it by trying to make it seem like they're not really foreign owned, but then all the manufactured parts are. They kind of work through shell corporations to skirt the edge of the law just so they can stick this stuff wherever they want. So they can generate electricity years from now in an amount that it's going to be minuscule compared to what they could do with other much better forms of electrical generation. So it's a no holds bar attempt to literally lay waste to our coastlines. Remember, the coastlines used to be important to leftists and progressives. Not anymore. Not anymore. Well, another piece of interesting news from the state of Oregon here. Oregon has sued on behalf of 3.5 million whose private driver's license ID card data was stolen in a data breach. A pair of Oregonians have filed a lawsuit that could force the state, so it's a class action lawsuit, to pay to the tune of many millions of dollars for the massive international data breach that victimized 3.5 million Oregon residents whose driver's license and ID card information was stolen. The plaintiffs, Carrie Evangeliste and Brian Ellis, are seeking class action status for all affected state residents whose information, including names, addresses, dates of birth, last four digits of social security number, heights, and weights, are hacked in May of 2023 by a Russian cyber gang. It's been filed in Marion County Circuit Court. Also hacked were an estimated 2,770 public and private organizations, from New York City schools to British Airways and the BBC, amounting to more than 90 million victims worldwide. The lawsuit doesn't really state how much each Oregonian could receive if it's successful, but it sets a minimum floor of $10 million and doesn't cite an upper limit. So let's keep an eye on this. Now, the only downside to this is that the people who cost us these enormous sums of money for their giant failures, they never lose their jobs. They never lose their jobs. We all have to pay for it, but they just never lose their jobs, which is crazy because actually, if you cost any organization that much money, maybe you should lose your job. Let me see if that works a little bit better. I just tried to post the article. By the way, there was a follow-up story to the visit at the in Yuma, and as you know, we did a captive audience yesterday covering it. It's a pretty interesting story. I recommend everybody take a read of it. They've met with members of the Arizona Republican Party, the state legislature controlled by Republicans, and they say they want to try to figure out how they can help keep the bad guys out while allowing legal immigration to occur. That's what Greg Smith said, who's from a state representative from Heppner, Republican. but they're also aware that they're really facing a daunting task, because what I saw and mentioned yesterday on the captive audience was that Texas is starting to secure their border, and that's making it less hospitable to all the traffickers, whether human or drug traffickers. So they're shifting westward to Arizona and to California, which is concerning, because uh, that, frankly, is that just proves that securing the border works. But it also proves that if you're in one of the states that has no intention of securing the border, maybe they need new leadership, like in California. I just don't know if they'll get it anytime soon. But um, there, I just posted a link to the video talking about the new hot spot, this one in California. Half of the fentanyl is coming across the section of the Arizona southern border with Mexico, is what Senator Knopp reported yesterday. That is really concerning. So, yeah, everything gets screwed up, but I think it's intentional incompetence. Um, I agree, Kathy, but I just think that it's being done on purpose, because you can't be this unintentionally stupid. It's really. Now, I did want to mention that Lori Chavez Dreamer is talking about the Fend Off Fentanyl Act, which she was one of the people leading the effort on that, introduced that legislation. Well, I guess it's been signed into law by the president after it's passed both houses of Congress. So there's some good news about things that are starting to move in the right direction. I have no idea how helpful it's going to be, or if it's going to go far enough, but there are signs of hope here and there. We just got to continue keeping the pressure on. And I know that's why the state legislators went to the southern border. They wanted to bring and shine a bright light on all of that. And I think they're starting to succeed at that, because we saw what doing that with Measure 110 did. They voted grudgingly, Democrats did, some of them, to recriminalize the hard drugs that are laying waste to our cities and flooding in across that southern border, and then fueling the drug addicted homeless and the crime that is a consequence of it. By the way, when we were talking about the library, they actually renamed the library Palestine at PSU. And it was Andy Ngo points out that the videos that he uncovered about this are ones that are put out there by Antifa, along with many pro-communist slogans, burn down the banks. They're all sort of connecting. All these different movements are connecting together. And as usual, our elected officials and people who are instructing law enforcement what they can and can't do are slow to the punch. They're falling behind, and it's ballooning out of control. So I don't know if this is going to be another summer of love, which is actually an ironic statement, considering that all of these hate-filled chants that you're hearing right now could only be a summer of hate. It's pretty obvious. Now, the U of O students, by the way, I also see here, have begun their encampment. And there could be some consequences for all of these folks, because people are noticing at the national level, we actually send a lot of money to these organizations, to these schools. And if these schools cave and start aiding and abetting these folks, and also allowing and aiding and abetting rampant anti-Semitism and harassment of Jewish students, Steve Scalise, the majority leader in the House of Representatives, said that the House of Representatives will be reassessing the billions of taxpayer dollars that go to these universities when those universities are refusing to ensure the safety of students and allowing this anti-Semitism and harassment to openly take place and threaten the lives and safety of these students. The aforementioned Laurie Chavez DeRemer actually has spoken out on this as well, and you can see a post here and a video uh, where she cited, of course, Portland State, where the whole place is forced to shut down today due to trespassers, which are the people who don't belong on the campus or don't have the legal right to be on the campus, shouting the hate-filled slogans and essentially shutting the place down. So this is a serious situation, one that's going to come to blows, because I don't want to send money to these folks. I'm not sending money to these people. I don't want to see taxpayer dollars funding these folks. If they want to go and protest, they can do it on their own dime. They can do it with someone else's money, and they can spend their time protesting that maybe they should be working to pay off their educations, which they've been expecting would be paid for by loans that would be just forgiven at some point. Well, if there's anybody who's completely undeserving of that, it's them. Oh, and not only is it a criminal activity, but what they're engaging in, but they should actually be severely fined and do time if convicted, because they're destroying property. You could have them do the repairs, Laurie, but that would be community service in addition to jail time and fines. If they want a shorter sentence, maybe that's their way to go. But Lars Larson points out that these guys actually invited the protests at PSU, and this is going to have consequences for them because none of us wants to pay for it. And appeasing evil, which is what's happening now, this is just going to make it worse. It is. So anyway, I thought that's a kind of a good summary up to date of what's happening across the different university campuses here in Oregon and what's happening nationally and the blowback that's happening. By the way, little reminder, voter registration deadline for the Oregon primaries is this week. My understanding, actually, I thought today is the deadline. Let me just double check that. So last day to register to vote for the Oregon primary is today. If you are registered to vote, but you are not registered with a party and you want to vote in that party's primary, for example, if you expect to vote in the Republican primary, then you really have to the end of the day today to register as a Republican. And you can do it very quickly. You can do it online. You don't need to go and fill out a form or go to an office or mail anything. Interestingly enough, you can't mail it and have it postmarked and still get your registration. It actually has to be done and received, like it used to be with ballots until they changed it and turned it into election month. But no, you can just go to OregonVotes.gov, OregonVotes.gov, go to My Vote and update your voter registration, and boom, you are a Republican and you can vote in the primary. And that's really important because there's some important races around the state where your voice needs to be heard. And one such race I'm going to just draw some attention to is the 4th Congressional District race. There's an interesting piece of news that came out of that race really in the last 24 hours, which is that one of the candidates in the Republican primary, Monique Despain, who's drawn a lot of media attention for the way she's gone after Democrat Val Hoyle and helped get her under investigation by the feds for her corrupt dealings with LaModa, the company that brought down Shemia Fagan. Monique Despain was endorsed by Majority Leader Steve Scalise, who said that he believes, and let me just pull it up here so I can read it directly. He said that, clicked on the wrong thing here. He said that he believes that the opportunity exists here he said to win and to defeat Val Hoyle, which he said as a retired Air Force colonel, attorney, and single mother, Monique Despain knows what it means to roll up her sleeves and get things done. She will fight to secure our border, rebuild our economy, reduce crime, and support law enforcement. Unlike her Democrat opponent, Monique will deliver for the people of Oregon, and I'm proud to endorse her in her race for Congress in Oregon's 4th congressional district. It's a pretty strong statement. And Monique Despain also, in this press release announcing the endorsement, said Leader Scalise is a fighter who, despite having to battle back from a near-fatal gunshot wound and fighting off cancer, he continues to fight for the American people every day, demonstrated grit and determination required to deliver victory in all our personal and public fights. I understand what it means to fight for my family, my clients, and my country. Results are what counts. I've served my country for 30 years in the Air Force and stood up to the governor on behalf of crime victims and raised my twin boys as conservatives right in the heart of progressive Eugene. Voters are ready to end 5 decades of failure, neglect, and waste at the hands of career politicians. She says, please deploy me, a political outsider, to fight them in D.C. Nice, strong statement. I'll post it here. There's it appeared in several different media outlets, so I will make sure that you can see this and share it with people, but also tell people, if you know anyone who lives in the 4th district and they want to vote in the Republican primary, they're going to have to register today. It's kind of the way our system works is in Oregon is that to vote in the Republican primary, you have to be a Republican. I know it sounds totally wacky that I'm just kidding. Obviously, that's total common sense, but it's going to take everybody to make their voices heard in these primaries and then to take the fight to the Democrats in the general election. And yes, Bobby, I'm pretty sure we're going to have Monique on at some point here. She's, I know, very busy campaigning, and there's a lot that goes into running these campaigns. You kind of turn your life upside down, and you spend every waking moment working on the campaign, and particularly with raising money, because raising money, it's the fuel for the fight. It just is. And I know that's something that everyone should consider too, is that you get to vote twice. You get to vote for the people on your ballot, and then you get to vote by boosting the people that can make a difference for all of us by donating to them. And so I'm just going to be, since I've mentioned Monique Despain, I'm just going to go ahead and post a link there. So now that I've told you about the latest news with her, you can go straight in there and you can donate to her as well, even if you don't live in the 4th district. This makes a difference because it's really hard to reach people. Everybody thinks it's easy. And then once you start trying to do it, you're like, this is really hard, knocking 1,000 doors. Most of them aren't home. How do we get their attention? And how do you make sure when the ballot shows up, they're like, I don't know these people? How do you do that? Well, you have to, like all other forms of marketing, you usually have to get in front of them 9 times, whether it be a piece of mail in a mailbox, a TV ad, a radio ad, a social media post, just getting into the news in general. And so this is why when people say, well, gee, I wish they could get money out of politics. So none of the things that you need to do to reach people get cheaper. They're usually the same tools that you use to reach people if you're trying to sell, shampoo and fast food and automobiles. But when it comes to political races, you have to raise it in tiny little chunks because that's what campaign finance has done. It didn't get the money out of politics. It just made it so that you had to spend nearly all of your time raising money instead of campaigning and talking to people. But I know Monique Despain is doing that. I know Lori Chavez Dreamer is busy trying to reach out to people, and while she's doing the work of raising money. And there's candidates in the 6th district. I met Mike Erickson, who's running at Dorchester this last weekend, and he's also got a promising race there, and explained how Andrea Salinas has lost in court after lying about him in the 2022 election. She's facing potentially significant civil fines, but also that's going to make a pretty good ad on TV when your opponent, who only wins by 7,000 votes, lied in order to win and got caught doing it and found guilty of that in court. So anyway, there's a lot going on in the state. Just imagine what we can make a difference at here in Oregon. The presidential race is likely to be determined ultimately in other states, often referred to as swing states. We can name a few of them: Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Georgia, among others. Florida and Ohio used to be swing states, but they're pretty solidly Republican at this point, amazingly. But the other 6 states I just mentioned, you win those states, you pretty much win the presidency. What can we make a difference at here in Oregon? This is going to be ground zero for who ends up controlling the House of Representatives. And just think what a big difference that makes. We post things here all the time, news that is from the national level about what's happening with the investigations and the legislation in the House of Representatives. Jim Jordan, Representative Comer, others. They are constantly trying to dig and get to the bottom of what's been done to our government in our name with our money. And particularly the weaponization of of the Department of Justice. This is very, very important. None of that would be happening, zero, if it weren't for the fact that we control at present the House of Representatives by one vote. One vote. That is simply not going to work for us to continue to hang on to the House of Representatives by a thread. In fact, you can count on it not happening. But there's one seat we have to hold on to that we're going to have to fight for. Lori Chavez Dreamer in the 5th District. I think we've got a very good chance, of course, at holding on to the 2nd District, the Cliff Bentz. And then there's the 4th District, the aforementioned Monique Despain, and the 6th District, which the nominee in 2022 is Mike Erickson, and he's running again and came within 7,000 votes. Just imagine if we flip those 2 seats, hold the 5th, obviously hold the 2nd, 4 out of 6 members of Congress from Oregon, and we hold on to the House of Representatives because of it. That's the difference you can make. You can make a huge difference nationally, and you can do it from what we have come to understand or believe is deep blue Oregon. But it's not so deep blue if 4 out of the 6 congressional representatives who have tied their fates to Joe Biden, the rubber stamps for Joe Biden, the Democrats are here in Oregon, and some of them don't care, like in the 3rd District or the 1st District, Bonamici, and the seat that's currently held by Blumenauer. But the other seats, not so comfortable for the arrogant Democrats who've doubled down on nearly every policy that's laying ruin to our state. I did want to mention, by the way, that there was a very interesting development, and some of you might not have heard about it. It was this past weekend in Portland. There's a fundraiser that takes place every year. It's called the Wayne Morris Gala. It is like the party fundraiser for the Democrats. And as it turns out, actually, they found themselves being laid siege to by the pro-Hamas protesters. And I think it's probably only a matter of time, for political reasons, that Joe Biden withdraws his support for Israel. But he is kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. However, a very good reporter for an outlet by the name of the Epoch Times reported on this Democrat fundraiser, and here was what happened. It's very interesting. So it was at the Portland Hilton Hotel, and while Jeff Merkley, the Democrat U.S. Senator, was making his speech, they were shouting so loud you could actually hear them inside of the hotel. and they were shouting, "Gaza will be your political grave," and uh, you could hear them shouting for the last 3 minutes of Merkley's speech. Merkley, meanwhile, said, "Here in Oregon, we all agree that we will stand against anti-Semitism and Islamophobia." Then he endorsed a two-state solution and moved on. The most interesting part of this article is what the Democrats talked about in all their speeches through all the people that were on that night. And this is the Democrat Party of Oregon and prominent Democrats, including a national Democrat who was in attendance. And by the way, they were chanting outside, "Portland PD, KKK, IDF, you're all the same." See? Antifa. Pounded on the locked doors and windows of the hotel. And PDX for Palestine claimed credit for they're proud of it. Banging pots and pans and getting loud for Gaza, they said. Well, here's what really happened. The Democrats spent the entire time talking about what they said are their top issues. They ran away from the Gaza issue as much as they could. They said reproductive rights are on the ballot. We need a Congress that can pass the Women's Health Reproduction Act. Just for all of you to know, that's actually an act to federalize the issue of abortion and impose a codification of Roe versus Wade, the circumstances that existed at Roe versus Wade nationally, imposed on every state. Right now, after the Dobbs decision, all of these decisions about how to regulate abortion has gone back to the states. There's no specific mention in the Constitution, no enumerated power empowering the federal government to engage in this issue. However, just like other issues, especially life and death and crime issues, those are all at the province of the states. Well, the Democrats want to impose on all these states who have made a different decision than Oregon, the decision Oregon's made through their elected representatives. And Senator Merkley spelled it out. That's exactly what he said. He said, healthcare is on the ballot. We need a Congress that will defend Obamacare. Climate is on the ballot. Equality, which they mean equity and wokeness, is on the ballot. It said democracy is on the ballot. They're just not a fan of people actually voting and deciding for themselves because they're all misinformed. And then Merkley called for reforming the filibuster and passing what they call the Freedom to Vote Act, which is, of course, the opportunity to impose all of the worst aspects of the voting system, like vote by mail, on every state in the country. The keynote speaker was Keith Ellison, the Minnesota Attorney General, a noted anti-Semite, by the way. He's made no bones about it, even though he's tried to say things contrary to it. He's made public statements in the past, which are just horrendous. And he said he urged Oregon Democrats to turn out to vote in the next election. He said that the Supreme Court is, quote, out of control and on the wrong path. He said we have Jim Crow for gay people. What's he talking about? He said it's legal to refuse to make a wedding cake or a video for them, which is an interesting way to look at forcing somebody to do that. He said, well, we have to force people to do that. That's the top concern of the country, is forcing wedding cakes and videos to be made by people who don't want to make that. It's insane. And he claims that the Supreme Court wants to wipe away affirmative action, which, of course, is reverse discrimination, quotas. Tina Kotek was there and said her party's top priorities are housing, addiction, education, transgender healthcare, and abortion rights. And that list of issues, I've seen multiple polls. Now, I know that housing and addiction are equated with homelessness. None of the stuff that Tina Kotek's been doing so far is doing anything to put a dent in either of those issues. And the housing issue is literally being caused by the government itself because of land use laws and permitting. That's right. And she wants to get a job for her wife. Exactly. But all those things they listed, they said are their top issues. Senate President Rob Wagner said that they are bulwarks for social justice. That's what they're there, and that they are fighting for the strongest abortion rights legislation in the United States and codifying gender affirming care. House Bill 2003. That's the original one, not the one that ended up passing ultimately. But this is interesting because at the end of this article, the reporter Scotty Barnes said, notably absent from the conversation at the event were any mentions of these issues: the economy, inflation, crime, or the U.S. border. Those four issues easily, far and away, are the top four issues in every poll across all voter groups. And they didn't talk about it at all at the Democrats' gala. Let's make sure people know this. And let's make sure people know that this is what this battle is really about. The Democrats have an entirely different set of priorities. They're the priorities that advance the policies that are all wrong for the country. And Republicans right now, they're the ones who need fuel for the fight, to correct the issues and address the issues that are the top concerns people have. We just have to get the word out. Anyway, so that was my solo flight for tonight. I hope that was interesting, and I'm glad I got to bring it to you. And we have to continue the fight. Oh, one last mention. I did mention there was a DEI story. Middle schoolers in West Virginia, 5 middle schoolers in West Virginia who protested a transgender athlete's participation in their track and field competition have been barred from future matches because they protested it. Apparently, this trans athlete won the competition resoundingly by a significant distance. And as a result, they, by more than 3 feet, which is a significant distance in the shot put. And these girls stood up for themselves and protested. And the consequence is they're going to be banned from playing. So there are girls who are being forced to compete with biological boys and are getting trounced by them, are being suspended, blocked from competing for protesting. Take that one with you and tell people about it, because I can tell you right now, this is why the Democrats are on the wrong track, and we have to fight to get this country back on the right track. Take a look at that report, share it with everyone you know, share this show with everyone you know, and I look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow on the next episode of The Captive Audience. I don't know exactly who's going to be on. It could be Sonny and I, but we really appreciate your viewership, and we think that you're the best fans in the world. So please share it with everyone and let other people know our little secret, which is that the Captive Audience is there for you, bringing the news every day.